I walked into my own home and heard voices I knew too well coming from the living room. Muffled. Conspiratorial. Wrong. My wife Elise stood beside my brother Nathan, both of them holding the same legal folder, the one that contained our father's company papers. The papers I was supposed to inherit. The company I'd built alongside my father for 15 years before cancer took him 6 months ago. Nathan looked up and smirked, not surprised to see me at all. "It's done, Adrian," he said, his voice cold and satisfied. "You're no longer in charge." I stared as Elise picked up a pen and signed her name beside Nathan's on a document I'd never seen before. The pen hit the mahogany table with a sound that echoed in my skull. My voice came out shaking. "You both planned this?" Silence filled the room like poison gas. Elise's eyes dropped to the floor, but she didn't deny it. Nathan crossed his arms, waiting for my reaction. My heart hammered so hard I thought they could hear it. This was my wife, my brother, the two people I'd trusted most in the world. And they just erased me from my own life. My name is Adrian Cole, and that was the moment everything I believed in shattered. 3 months earlier, everything had seemed normal. That's what made it worse looking back. Elise started working late at the marketing firm where she'd been a junior partner for 2 years. "Big campaign," she'd say, kissing my cheek before rushing out the door at 7 in the evening. I believed her because why wouldn't I? We'd been married for 8 years. We'd built a life together. Nathan started showing up more often too, usually when Elise was home. "Just checking on you, brother," he'd say, clapping my shoulder, "making sure you're handling things after Dad." I appreciated it then. My father's death had left me hollow, and running his manufacturing company alone felt overwhelming. Nathan offered to help with paperwork, said he wanted to learn the business. I gave him access to files, taught him the systems, introduced him to our suppliers. I thought I was building bridges with my younger brother. I thought Elise was supporting my grief by giving me space. I was so stupid. The signs were there. Elise's phone buzzing constantly. Nathan's lingering glances at her. The way they'd both go quiet when I entered a room. But grief made me blind. I trusted loyalty. I believed in family. That was my mistake. I started noticing things going missing. Small things at first. A folder of supplier contracts. Dad's old ledger with handwritten notes about client relationships. I asked Elise if she'd seen them. She laughed, touching my arm gently. "Honey, you've been so stressed lately. Maybe you just misplaced them?" Her voice was soft, concerned, loving even. I wanted to believe her. Nathan was there that evening, sitting on our couch like he belonged there. "Adrian, man, you've been forgetting a lot lately," he said, his tone sympathetic. "Maybe you should take a break. I can handle things at the office for a few days." They exchanged a glance I pretended not to see. I rubbed my temples, exhausted. "Maybe you're right," I said quietly. "Maybe I'm just tired." That night, I lay awake beside Elise, staring at the ceiling. She was asleep or pretending to be. I replayed the conversation in my head. Had I really forgotten? Was grief making me lose track of things? They seemed so genuine, so worried about me. But something in my gut twisted. Something whispered that I wasn't crazy. I ignored it. I shouldn't have. 2 weeks later, I found a contract on my desk with my signature on it. Except I'd never signed it. The document authorized Nathan as co-director of operations, giving him equal decision-making power. My hands shook as I stared at my own forged signature. I confronted Elise that night, the paper crumpled in my fist. She barely looked up from her laptop. "You signed that months ago, Adrian. Don't you remember? Right after your father's funeral. You were so out of it." Her tone was patient, like she was talking to a confused child. I searched my memory desperately. Had I? The weeks after Dad died were a blur of paperwork and grief. Nathan appeared in the doorway. "I was there when you signed it, brother. You said you needed help." They both watched me, waiting. The doubt crept in like fog. Maybe I had signed it. Maybe I was losing my grip on reality. "Maybe I did," I whispered, hating how uncertain I sounded. Elise smiled sympathetically and went back to her laptop. Nathan squeezed my shoulder as he left. I sat alone in my father's study, staring at that signature, and felt myself disappearing. Sunday dinner at Elisa's parents' house should have been normal. Her mother cooked roast chicken. Her father talked about golf. Nathan joined us, which had become standard lately. We sat around the table like a happy family. Nathan raised his glass. "To keeping the family strong," he said, looking directly at me. Everyone clinked glasses. I noticed how Elisa's parents smiled warmly at Nathan, how they asked him about the business like he was the one running it. When I mentioned concerns about some recent decisions, Elisa's father waved his hand dismissively. "You're being paranoid, Adrian. Nathan's just trying to help." Her mother nodded. "You've always been too sensitive about these things." I felt the walls closing in. They were all on the same page and I was the outsider. Nathan caught my eye across the table and smiled. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elise touched my hand under the table. A gesture that once would have comforted me. Now it felt like a leash. I forced myself to smile, to play along. But inside, I was screaming. This was a trap, and I'd walked right into it. I didn't plan to record them. My phone was on the kitchen counter, voice memo accidentally running when I came home early from a supplier meeting. I'd forgotten it and gone upstairs. Later that night, I discovered the recording. 43 minutes of audio. I almost deleted it. Then I heard Elisa's voice, low and conspiratorial. "He still thinks we're helping him." Nathan's laugh was quiet, cruel. "By the time he figures it out, it'll be over. The company will be mine, and he'll be too broken to fight back." There was a pause. Then Elise again. "Are you sure he won't suspect? He's been asking questions." "Let him ask," Nathan said. "We control the narrative. Everyone already thinks he's losing it." I listened to that recording 3 times, sitting in my car in the garage. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The 2 people I loved most had been orchestrating my destruction, and I'd helped them every step of the way. I saved the file, backed it up in 3 places. Then I went inside and acted like nothing had changed. I confronted Elise the next morning. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I know what you're doing," I said, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. She turned from the coffee maker, her face morphing into shock and hurt. "What are you talking about?" I told her about the recording. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "You were spying on me?" Her voice broke. "You don't trust me? After everything we've been through?" She made it about my betrayal, my paranoia, my failure as a husband. "You've been controlling and suspicious for months," she sobbed. "I've tried to help you, to support you, but you push everyone away." I stood there, stunned by how quickly she'd turned it around. For a moment I questioned everything. Was I the villain? Was I destroying my own marriage with baseless accusations? She cried harder, and I felt myself softening despite the evidence I'd heard. "I'm sorry," I started to say. Then I stopped. Remembered Nathan's laugh on that recording. Remembered the forged signature. No, I wasn't crazy. This was gaslighting, and it was working. I walked out of the kitchen without another word. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat in my father's study with my laptop, scrolling through months of emails, text messages, bank statements, anything I could find. Elise was asleep upstairs, or maybe she was awake too, planning her next move. Patterns emerged as the hours passed. Meetings she'd claimed were with clients were actually at hotels. Receipts for dinners for 2 when she'd said she was working late alone. Shared passwords I'd given Nathan had been changed, locking me out of systems I'd built. Money transfers I didn't authorize. NDAs I'd never signed being used to silence suppliers who questioned Nathan's authority. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been methodical, careful, planned over months. Maybe longer. They'd been erasing me piece by piece. So gradually I hadn't noticed until I was almost gone. By dawn, I had a folder of evidence. Screenshots, bank records, forged documents. My hands shook as I organized it all, but my mind was clear for the first time in months. They'd underestimated me. That was their mistake. I drove to our father's old workshop on the edge of town. Nathan was there, going through Dad's tools like he owned them. We need to talk, I said. He didn't look surprised. Finally figured it out? He turned, wiping grease from his hands. Took you long enough. I demanded the truth, all of it. Nathan's mask of concern dropped completely. You were always the favorite, he said, his voice bitter. Dad's golden boy, the responsible son. I was just the screw-up who had to watch you inherit everything. So you decided to steal it? His smile was cold. I decided to take what should have been mine from the start. I lunged at him, fury overwhelming me. He stepped back easily, holding up his hands. Go ahead. Assault me. That'll help your case. I stopped, breathing hard. We already took everything, Adrian, Nathan said calmly. The company's being restructured. Your name's being removed from the leadership. Elise signed her shares over to me. It's done. I stared at my brother, the stranger wearing his face. You'll regret this, I said quietly. He laughed. I don't think so. I came home to find Elise packing suitcases in our bedroom. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she was performing for an invisible audience. I can't do this anymore, she said without looking at me. You've become someone I don't recognize. The audacity of her words would have been funny if they didn't hurt so much. She was leaving me, making herself the victim in the story of her own betrayal. You pushed me away, she continued, folding a sweater with careful precision. You were so consumed with grief and paranoia that you forgot about us. I stood in the doorway watching her pack 8 years of marriage into luggage. Part of me wanted to beg her to stay, to explain, to fight for what we'd built. But that part was dying, being murdered by the truth. Where will you go? I asked, my voice flat. My sister's, she said, not Nathan's. Interesting. Maybe their alliance was already fracturing. She walked past me with her suitcases, pausing at the door. I'm sorry it ended like this. I didn't respond. I watched her leave, watched her car disappear down the street. Then I went to my father's study and pulled out the folder of evidence. Something in my eyes had changed. The grief was gone. In its place was something colder, clearer, dangerous. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror that night, really looking at myself for the first time in months. I'd lost weight. There were dark circles under my eyes. I looked haunted, broken. That's what they'd wanted. A broken man was easier to erase. They expected me to stay quiet, I said to my reflection. That was their mistake. My father had taught me that silence was sometimes strength, but there was a difference between patience and surrender. I'd been patient. I'd given them rope. Now they'd hung themselves with it. I made a list that night. Not a revenge list, something colder. A reclamation list. Documents to gather. Lawyers to contact. Witnesses to interview. Accounts to freeze. I wasn't going to destroy Nathan and Elise. I was going to let the truth do that for me. My father used to say the best business strategy was to let your competitors defeat themselves. Nathan thought he'd won by stealing the company. But he'd forgotten that I actually knew how to run it. He'd forgotten that I had relationships he couldn't forge, trust he couldn't fake, knowledge he couldn't steal. I smiled at my reflection. Game on. I called Marcus Webb, a lawyer my father had trusted for 30 years. Within 2 days, we had a meeting scheduled. Marcus listened to everything, reviewed my evidence, and leaned back in his leather chair. This is fraud, he said simply. Multiple counts. Forgery, embezzlement, possibly wire fraud if any of this crossed state lines. We started building the case. Every forged signature was documented and compared to my real signature. Every unauthorized transaction was traced. Every lie was cataloged with evidence. Marcus connected me with a forensic accountant who found shell companies Nathan had created, money being funneled into accounts under fake business names. Elisa's email authorization appeared on dozens of fraudulent transactions. She wasn't just Nathan's accomplice. She was an active participant. How long will this take? I asked. Marcus smiled grimly. Justice is slow, but it's thorough. We'll get everything back. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months. I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies. More importantly, I had the truth. And the truth I was learning was the most powerful weapon of all. While going through our shared cloud drive, I found a folder I didn't recognize. It was hidden, password protected. But Elise had used the same password for everything, our wedding date. Inside were screenshots of text conversations between her and Nathan. Messages that made my stomach turn. "He's been so pathetic lately. Makes this almost too easy," Elise had written. Nathan's response: "Just keep him off balance. Couple more weeks and we're done." There were photos too. Them laughing at a restaurant. Them at a hotel. Them in my father's office going through his files while I was at his funeral. They documented their own betrayal like it was a game. I printed everything. Every screenshot, every message, every photo. I organized them chronologically, building a timeline of deception. Then I put them in a folder labeled simply evidence and added it to the legal case. Marcus called it a gift. "Defendants who document their own crimes make my job easy," he said. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt sad. These were people I'd loved. People I'd trusted with everything. And they'd betrayed me with smiles on their faces. Nathan moved fast once he realized I wasn't going quietly. Rumors started spreading through our business community. "Adrian's having a breakdown," people whispered. "He's unstable. Dangerous, even." Clients I'd worked with for years started taking Nathan's calls instead of mine. Suppliers who'd known me since I was a kid suddenly treated me with suspicion. Friends stopped returning messages. I watched my social circle shrink as Nathan's grew. He played the concerned brother perfectly. "I'm just trying to keep the business running while Adrian gets help," he told people. It's tragic, really. The stress of losing our father broke something in him. Elise backed up every story. "I had to leave for my own safety," she told her friends. He was becoming someone I didn't recognize. The isolation was suffocating. I'd go days without talking to anyone except Marcus. But I kept working, gathering evidence, and kept preparing. They were winning the social battle. I was preparing to win the war. There was a difference. One created temporary noise. The other created permanent consequences. The first crack appeared when Troy Hammond, who'd worked in our accounting department for 10 years, came forward. He called me directly, his voice nervous. "Mr. Cole, there's something you should know." Troy had records of unauthorized transfers Nathan had made. Money shifted between accounts in ways that violated company policy. He'd kept copies because something felt wrong. "I didn't know who to tell," Troy said. "Nathan said you'd approved everything, but the signatures didn't look right." Troy's testimony gave us leverage. Marcus used it to freeze several accounts pending investigation. Suddenly, Nathan couldn't move money as freely. It was a small victory, but it felt massive. One person had chosen truth over convenience. One person had seen through the lies. That night, I called Troy to thank him. "Why did you come forward?" I asked. "Your father was a good man," Troy said simply. "He built that company with integrity. What Nathan's doing, it's not right." Someone had to say something. I hung up and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. 3 weeks after she'd left, Elise showed up at the house unannounced. She looked tired, her makeup less perfect than usual. "Can we talk?" she asked. I let her in but didn't offer coffee or comfort. We sat in the living room like strangers. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice small. "Nathan, he convinced me that you were trying to cut me out, that I needed to protect myself. I believed him. It was a lie, but I let her continue. "We can fix this," she said, reaching for my hand. "We can go to counseling. Start over. I still love you." I looked at her, this woman I'd married, and felt nothing. No anger, no love, no pain. Just cold clarity. "I recorded everything, Elise," I said quietly. Her hand froze. "What?" "Every conversation. Every lie. Every plan you and Nathan made. I have all of it." The color drained from her face. She pulled her hand back like I'd burned her. "You can leave now," I said. She stood up slowly, realization dawning. "Adrian, please, I can explain." "No," I said. "You really can't." She left without another word. I watched her car disappear and smiled. She'd come to assess the damage, to see if I knew the truth. Now she knows. And now she'd panic. Elisa's panic led exactly where I knew it would. Straight back to Nathan. But instead of solidarity, she found suspicion. I heard about their fight through Troy, who heard it from another employee who'd witnessed them screaming at each other in the parking lot. "You told him about the recordings?" Nathan yelled. "No, he already knew. He's been playing us. This was your plan." Elise screamed back. "You said it would be easy. You said he'd never fight back." Their alliance, built on betrayal, crumbled the moment pressure appeared. I watched from a distance, literally. I'd started parking across from the office just to observe. I saw Elise storm out. Saw Nathan throw something against his office wall. They'd turned on each other exactly as I'd predicted. Betrayers always do. "Your brother tried to call you 4 times today," Marcus told me later. "Let it go to voicemail. He's desperate, which means he's making mistakes." Nathan left messages. First angry, then pleading. "We're still brothers," one message said. "We can work this out." But we weren't brothers anymore. Brothers don't forge signatures. Brothers don't steal companies. Brothers don't destroy each other for inheritance. We were just 2 men who happened to share blood. And soon we'd share a courtroom. Marcus filed the official complaint on a Tuesday morning. Fraud, forgery, embezzlement. The words looked harsh on legal paper, but they were accurate. We had documentation for everything. The forged signatures, analyzed by a handwriting expert. The unauthorized transfers traced by forensic accountants. The conspiracy, proven through Elise and Nathan's own text messages. Nathan received the notice that afternoon. He called me immediately, his voice shaking with rage. "You're actually doing this? Suing your own brother? You forged my signature," I said calmly. "You stole my inheritance. What did you expect? Family doesn't do this to family," he shouted. "You did it first," I replied and hung up. The investigation moved faster than I'd expected. State authorities got involved when the dollar amounts became clear. Nathan had embezzled over $400,000. Elisa's involvement, proven through email authorizations and bank records, made her complicit. "They'd be lucky to avoid jail time," Marcus said. "At minimum, they'd be paying restitution for years." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. Justice wasn't revenge. It was just the correction of wrongs. But correcting wrongs still hurts. I wrote a statement and posted it online. Not on social media where it could be dismissed as drama, but on the company website, on industry forums, in professional circles where truth mattered. I laid out everything. The timeline of betrayal. The forged documents. The evidence. I didn't editorialize. I didn't attack Nathan or Elise personally. I just presented facts with supporting documentation. "This is what happened," the statement concluded. "This is the truth. Make of it what you will." It went viral within 48 hours. Business journals picked it up. Local news covered it. Other victims of similar schemes reached out, sharing their own stories. The narrative Nathan had built of the unstable brother having a breakdown collapsed under the weight of evidence. Suddenly, I was the voice of betrayal and dignity. The man who'd stayed silent while gathering proof. The man who'd let the truth speak for itself. Comments poured in. Support from strangers. Apologies from friends who'd believed Nathan's lies. Messages from other family business owners who'd faced similar betrayals. I didn't respond to most of them. I said what needed saying. Now I'd let the consequences unfold. The consequences came fast. Elise lost her partnership at the marketing firm within a week. Her bosses couldn't keep someone publicly involved in fraud. Nathan's business partners pulled out of deals. Suppliers refused to work with him. Banks froze his accounts pending investigation. The empire they'd tried to build on lies collapsed in days. I watched it happen through updates from Marcus and Troy. I didn't feel joy. I felt something else. Vindication, maybe, or just exhaustion. "You didn't destroy them," Marcus said during one of our meetings. "Their lies did." He was right. I just pulled back the curtain. They'd built the house of cards. fell on its own. The company, legally still in transition, was frozen by court order. Nathan couldn't make decisions. Neither could I, but I had patience. I'd wait for the courts to restore what was rightfully mine. I'd wait for justice. In the meantime, I worked on rebuilding relationships Nathan had damaged. I called clients personally, explained what had happened, and promised to make things right. Most listened. Many came back. Trust, once broken, was hard to repair. But I was willing to try. That's what leaders did. I ran into Nathan at the courthouse during a preliminary hearing. We stood in the hallway, 20 feet apart. Years of brotherhood turned to ash between us. He approached me, his face twisted with anger. "You ruined me," he spat. "Everything I worked for, gone. Because you couldn't handle losing for once." I looked at my brother and felt nothing but pity. "I didn't ruin you, Nathan," I said steadily. "You did that yourself." "I deserved that company," he hissed. "I deserved Dad's respect. But no, perfect Adrian got everything. Dad left me the company because I earned it," I said. "I worked beside him for 15 years. Where were you? Out finding yourself? Starting businesses that failed? You wanted the reward without the work." He moved closer, his hands clenched into fists. "You always thought you were better than me." "No," I said. "I just knew the difference between earning something and stealing it." Nathan stared at me, searching for the brother he'd betrayed. But that person was gone. I'd buried him alongside my father. We stood in silence, two strangers who'd once shared everything. Finally, Nathan turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him go and felt the last thread of our bond snap. A month later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I knew it was Elise before I opened it. "I never meant for it to go this far," the message read. "I know you won't believe me, but I'm sorry. Nathan convinced me you were trying to cut me out. I was scared. I made terrible choices. I wish I could take it all back." I stared at the message for a long time. She wanted forgiveness. Or maybe just acknowledgement. Some sign that I still cared enough to respond. I thought about replying. Thought about telling her that fear didn't justify betrayal. That her choices had destroyed more than just my trust. But then I deleted the message and blocked the number. Some things didn't deserve responses. Some apologies came too late to matter. She'd made her choices. Now she'd live with them. That evening, I sat in my father's study and felt something close to peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. The truth was out. Justice was happening. My voice, silenced for so long, had finally been heard. And I'd reclaimed it not through anger or revenge, but through patience and truth. That felt right somehow. That felt like something my father would approve of. Nathan's trial began on a cold October morning. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood-paneled and formal. Elise was called as a witness, having taken a deal to testify against Nathan in exchange for reduced charges. I sat in the back, watching as the prosecution laid out their case. The forged signatures, the embezzled funds, the conspiracy. Nathan's lawyer tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, a family dispute blown out of proportion. But the evidence was overwhelming. Text messages where Nathan discussed getting rid of Adrian. Bank records showing systematic theft. Forged documents that handwriting experts confirmed were fake. Elise testified quietly, her voice barely audible. She admitted to signing authorizations Nathan had prepared. Admitted to helping him access files. Admitted that she'd known the signatures were forged. Nathan stared at her with betrayal in his eyes, as if he couldn't believe she'd turned on him. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. When it was over, Nathan broke. He stood up, shouting that it wasn't supposed to be like this, that I'd ruined everything. The judge ordered him removed. I watched my brother fall apart and felt only emptiness. The court ruled in my favor. Nathan was convicted of fraud and embezzlement. Elise took a plea deal, probation, and restitution in exchange for her testimony. The company was returned to me, legally and completely. I cleaned the house immediately, removed anyone who'd been complicit, brought back people like Troy who'd shown integrity, restructured the leadership to prevent future abuses. Then I reopened under a new name, Cole and Sons, second generation. My father's legacy continued. The community that had doubted me rallied. Clients returned. Suppliers offered support. People who'd believed Nathan's lies apologized. I accepted their apologies without judgment. We'd all been manipulated. Within 6 months, the company was thriving again. Revenue increased. New contracts signed. The business my father built was stronger than ever, not despite the betrayal, but because of how I'd handled it. I'd shown that truth mattered, that integrity wasn't a weakness, that patience and strategy beat anger and revenge. My father would have been proud. I smiled, not in triumph, but in peace. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about honoring what he'd built. And I'd done that. A year after everything began, I stood on a pier at sunrise. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, water meeting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I'd come here to think, to finally process everything that had happened. My wife had betrayed me. My brother had stolen from me. My life had been dismantled piece by piece. But I'd survived. More than survived. I'd reclaimed everything they'd taken. Not through revenge or cruelty, but through patience and truth. They silenced me with betrayal, I said to the empty morning. But I learned something they never did. You can't bury the truth forever. The wind picked up, salt spray touching my face. I thought about Nathan, probably still bitter in whatever life he'd built from the ruins. I thought about Elise carrying the weight of her choices. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate required energy I didn't want to spend. Forgiveness isn't weakness, I said quietly. It's how I took my power back. I looked out at the ocean and felt truly free for the first time in over a year. Free from their lies. Free from the silence they'd imposed. Free to build whatever came next. The reckoning was complete. Not because I'd destroyed them, but because I'd refused to let them destroy me. I turned from the pier and walked back toward my car, toward my company, toward my future. The sun rose behind me and I didn't look back.